everyone! Today we're going to talk about classroom management during an interactive read aloud lesson. Now, over the past few weeks, we've been talking a lot about using interactive read alouds in your classroom. And last week was one of my favorite videos where we talked about different types of engagement strategies to use in your classroom during this lesson, such as turning and talking, stopping and jotting, or even acting out different things during a read aloud. And you were probably thinking, there's no way my class can handle that. I have to stay at the front of the room, read the book, and that's that. I'm here to tell you that it can be done in your classroom, but we need to take some preventative steps beforehand to help our students understand what our behavior should look like during an interactive read aloud. This is the last video in our interactive read aloud strategies series, and as with all of the other videos, I will have a freebie for you at the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But now let's jump into those different classroom management strategies that we can put into place in order to make our interactive read aloud lessons as effective as they can be. So first, we're going to talk about teaching expectations, and you're going to start this from day one. Now, when I first started teaching, I jumped headfirst into the content at the beginning of September when my students came into the classroom. I then decided to take a few steps back. It took me a few years as a teacher to figure this out, but by going over the expectations over and over again, by practicing them for a long time, sets the tone for the rest of the year. So by taking that extra time at the very beginning of the year to go over the expectations during different parts during an interactive read aloud lesson will make all of your lessons so much easier as you go throughout the year. And you're going to practice these a lot. Just when you think you've practiced them enough, I encourage you to go over it again. Even if you're doing this with older students, I know I've heard a lot of teachers say, they're fourth graders, they should know how to do this. Well, the thing is, you're a different teacher than they had last year, for the most part, and different from the teacher they had the year before. So even though they are older, each teacher is expecting something different for them, and we need to explicitly teach them what we're expecting. We need to show them, we need to practice it, we need to act it out, so that they know what you're expecting. And one fun thing that I like to do with my students is practice examples, have students act out what it should look like, and even practice some non-examples of what it shouldn't look like. And they get a kick out of it, but it really sinks in. It really helps them remember what behavior expectations I'm looking for. And not only should these be taught at the beginning of the year, but I highly recommend reviewing them after a long vacation, or if you're starting to see your lessons not go so well, that's a great time to review those expectations and get your students back on the right track. And we're going to jump into a few of those behavior expectations in a minute, but the first thing that I wanted to go through that I think is important to set the tone is to create strategic seating during your interactive read aloud lesson. It's very easy to just call the students to the rug and have them sit wherever they want, but first, this takes a little while because students have to kind of pick a spot, who they want to sit with. Sometimes they sit somewhere, then they want to move somewhere else. You know how it goes. But by giving them specific spots, it eliminates that thinking that they need to do, and they just know exactly where to go. By giving them strategic spots, you are also picking their turn and talk partner. So we talked about this in a previous video, how when you are using the engagement strategy of turn and talk, you should have predetermined partners set up for your students to make sure that all students are successful. So by picking their seat ahead of time and partnering them with someone ahead of time, it eliminates that chaos almost of moving from their desks to the rug, and they know exactly where to go and everyone can get settled right away. This also eliminates the turning and talking when they're not supposed to be. You know, those side conversations that your students get into. By placing students in specific spots, that will keep them from talking during your read aloud to their best friend who might be sitting next to them. But even though you are designating these spots, I recommend switching them up throughout the year. That way they are working with different partners, they have different spots, they're not too comfortable in that one area, but by switching it up once a month or so, students have that opportunity to work with different peers and to have a different spot on the rug and to switch it up and make things a little bit different. And when creating these spots and these turn and talk partners, one thing you should go over with your students is what to do if their student is absent, because that's another interruption that could happen during your read aloud, where you say turn and talk, but you have that student who doesn't know what to do because their partner's not there. So come up with a plan with your students and practice it. If your partner's not there, what could you do instead? And this sets that expectation up ahead of time so that you are not dealing with it in the moment. The student already knows what they need to do. They might need a reminder, but a quick reminder is much easier than having to deal with it in the moment as you're trying to read aloud and run your lesson. And another way to approach strategic seating is to create modifications when needed. If your student needs to be sitting on a chair, have those chairs around the outside of the rug so that they are part of the classroom community, but they are in a place where they will be most successful. So you really need to take into account the students in your classroom and be willing to make those modifications when needed. Now let's talk about interruptions. And this is one thing that so many teachers come to me with, that there are so many interruptions during their read aloud lesson that they feel like they can't get through it. And I understand, I've been there. There's the intercom going off, or if you have a phone in your room. I know when I was teaching, I had both. Sometimes they would both be going off at the same time. Or if another teacher comes into the room, set that expectation with students. What happens when a teacher walks into the room? If you need to get up and talk with someone, what are you expecting them to do at that time? When you come back to the rug after answering a phone call, what is the behavior you're expecting from them? When they see you come back, should they still be talking with their friend, or do they know that that's the signal that they need to pay attention and get ready? This is another thing that they can practice, which they'll get a kick out of and have fun with, but by practicing it, they'll know what to do when that interruption happens, and you'll be able to move more smoothly back into the read aloud lesson. Another common type of interruption that you'll have during a read aloud lesson is interruptions from your students. You hold up the book, you're ready to read, and your students jump out, I've read that book already. I already know what happens. Come up with some ideas, some go-to responses for when that happens. Maybe you can give that student a silent signal to let them know that it's okay that they've read it before. Or use that opportunity to explain what wonderful thing it is to reread a book and to hear it for a second or third time. You may have students interrupt in the middle when they hear their cousin's name in the book, and they're so excited to tell you about it. Again, come up with a go-to response ahead of time to let students know that while it's exciting, that's not the best time to share it, and that we want to continue with the read aloud without them yelling that out. Or sometimes you might be asking a question, and before you give the students the opportunity to turn and talk, a student may blurt out the answer right away. This is a great time, or even ahead of time, to talk with students about why we don't blurt out answers. A conversation about why it's important to wait to share our thinking so that our friends have time to think, so that their peers have time to share with another. And again, this is something that they will probably need to be reminded of, but by setting that expectation at the beginning of the year, we're helping students to know how we want our read aloud lesson to look and how to make it successful for everybody that's listening and learning at that time. Another way to ensure that the interactive read aloud lesson goes smoothly is if you are using student materials. So last week we talked about different engagement strategies, and one thing that I mentioned was a stop and jot or a stop and draw, in which a student responds to a question by writing their answer down or drawing a picture and then sharing it with you or with the whole class. Now there are different ways that you can do this, such as with a post-it note and pencil or a whiteboard and a marker. But we all know that when students have materials in front of them, they're going to want to play with them. So first, as I mentioned earlier, was to have students bring the materials to the rug with them when they come for the read aloud. That way, during the lesson, they're not getting up, searching for materials, and interrupting the flow of the lesson. They have everything, they're prepared. This is another thing to practice with students. What do we do when the materials are in front of us? Are we playing with them? Are we hitting people with them? Or are they sitting on the ground in front of us? Practice this with your student. Then practice when they should pick those materials up. I know it sounds a little silly, but sometimes students, well, I shouldn't say sometimes, a lot of times students will pick up their materials before it's time and they'll miss the question. And then you have more interruptions of students asking you to repeat it. So come up with a signal for your students. Say, I'm going to ask a question, and when I raise my hand, that's when it's time for you to pick up your materials. That way students are fully present for the reading, for the question, and then they're all responding at the same time. Again, practice what to do once they've written down what their response is. Are they going to show it to you right away? Are they going to wait for another signal from you? And then what should they do with their materials once you're done with that engagement strategy, once it's time to start reading the story again? So go through all of those steps with your students, practice them so they know that what you're expecting. Hopefully remember it a little bit better for next time. And the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to classroom management during an interactive read aloud lesson is making sure that you are prepared. Like we talked about, having students have their materials, but making sure that your lesson is ready to go. You have the book, you have all of your questions written out ahead of time and placed in the book. This way, you know exactly where you need to stop. I know in the past, I've read through a couple pages and then said, oh, wait a minute, and tried to go back. I forgot to ask my question. But by having that all in the book ahead of time, writing right on Post-it notes, sticking them right on the page where they go, will help you be prepared. Making sure that you have all the materials that you need for the lesson. Do you need an anchor chart? Do you need markers to write on the anchor chart? What other materials do you need for the lesson? Having all of the materials at the rug all ready to go for your lesson will make sure to eliminate those interruptions to the flow of the story. Now, having all of that prepared and ready to go can be a lot, and making sure that you have all those questions ahead of time takes a lot of planning. But by making sure that you're not going and coming up with questions on the fly, make sure that your lesson is focused and your students are getting the most out of it. I know that a lot goes into that. And that's why I created the Colorful Apple Book Club. In the book club, you will receive 5 lessons all done for you every month. All you need to do is print them and teach. You will have the discussion questions, engagement strategies all ready to go, a lesson plan and an anchor chart ready for you. All you need to do is print them out and teach. You won't have to do any of the planning. You won't have to do any of the deciding of the book. It's all there for you. I know this will be a huge help for you in your classroom. It will save you so much time, and it will really make sure all of your interactive read aloud lessons are focused and your students are getting the most out of them that they can. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below, and I can't wait for you to join us inside the Colorful Apple Book Club. So I hope that this video was helpful and that you learned some classroom management strategies to help your interactive read aloud lessons be the best that they can be. I know how powerful these lessons can be in your classroom, and by having these expectations in place, they will have the full effect on your students and they will be learning so much more. If you know someone that would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them and then give this video a thumbs up, and be sure to hit that red subscribe button because I'll be back next Sunday night with more read aloud tips and book ideas that you can use in your classroom right away. Have a great week.